What is going on, guys? My name is Cooper. Welcome back to another Java tutorial. So last time we talked about primitive data types as well as the string. Today we're going to talk about math. I know math, it's just so lovely, but you will use it a lot. Don't worry, we're not going to get into super complicated calculus and all that stuff. I'm just going to teach you guys how to do the basic math operations in Java. So let's go ahead and declare a few variables here. Let's say int, I don't know, let's think of a fun equation to do, if equations can ever be fun. But yeah, I don't know, whatever. Let's just come up with something. Let's say int number of apples eaten today. And we'll just say I've had 0. Okay? Now, if I were to print out the number of apples eaten today, right? Because you can print out, when you print out, it doesn't necessarily have to be a string. Okay, it can be whatever you want. And if we were to run this, it'll, as I'm sure you can guess, it'll print out 0, because that's what it is. If we were to change this number to 2, and then we run it, it would print out 2 down here. I'll see if I make this a little bit bigger for you guys. So there you go. So now okay, when you keep in mind that when you run this program, you're only going to get this. You don't actually get to see the code. So nobody really knows what this 2 is, right? They're going to be like, what is this? Is it 2 bananas eaten today, or is it 2 apples? Like, we don't know. So I guess kind of a sub lesson here is string concatenation. We can type in double quotes, because remember, we're typing in a string, number of apples eaten, just like that. And then we're going to add this plus sign. And notice the plus sign is not within the quotes. If we add it here, this is treated as a string literal. It will literally print out a plus sign. We do not want that. We want it to just say, take this string literal, and at the end of it, go ahead and tack on this number. Now you guys are going to notice a slight problem when I run this. Number of apples eaten to 2. There's no space here, and that's because it literally just takes this 2 and will just stick it right after this. So what we should probably do is add a colon and a space, and then you'll know when we print it out, it'll look a little bit better. So that is how you do string concatenation. But now, what if we were to say, okay, well, now I eat one more apple. Okay, so now the number of apples eaten today should be 3, right? So if we were to print this out again, what we'd want to see is number of apples eaten 2, eat one more apple, number of apples eaten 3. But if we run this, it's not going to do that, because we didn't actually change the number. We actually need to tell it that I ate one more apple. So what we can do is we can say number of apples eaten today is equal to the current number of apples eaten today plus 1, right? Because the right hand of the equation gets calculated first, and then it gets stuck into the left hand of the equation. So it's going to say number of apples eaten today. Again, it does the right half first, so we're just doing this. So it says the current number of apples eaten today is 2. So this is another way of writing the number 2. So 2 plus 1 is 3, and then it's going to put that 3 into number of apples eaten today. So now you can see our program works fine. Now this is kind of tedious to write out, honestly. I mean, when you think about having to say number of apples eaten today equals number of, so what you can actually do is a little bit of a shortcut here. You can just say plus equals 1, and what that does is it just says, okay, just take this and add 1 to it, and you could say add 10 to it if you wanted to, and then it should jump up to 12, and you'll see right here, go ahead and does that. And I'm sure, as you guys can imagine, you can also say minus equals 1, and it will subtract 1 from the current number. And again, you could write it out long as well and just say number of apples eaten today minus 1. You do that as well. There's also that way it works too, same thing. What you can also do, there's one more thing you can do. Now, the reason you would want to say plus equals or minus equals, in our case we're going to say plus equals, is if this is something other than 1. You might, like I said, you might say 10, and that's fine, that works. If you are only incrementing it by 1, there is one other option, but again, this only works if you're incrementing by 1. You can just say plus plus, and that will work too. And the plus plus can go here, or it can actually go at the beginning of it. There is a difference in them, but as of right now, just know that either one works. In this situation, if you want to be technically correct, you should add it at the end, although it doesn't matter, and we'll get into that a little bit later when we get into kind of more some more advanced situations. And this also does work with minus minus as well, and you can subtract 1 from it too. So yeah, so that's how you do basic addition and subtraction. So yeah. Okay, so now what if you want to do, what if you just want to change this altogether? You just say eat more apples, right? Eat more apples. You don't really know how many. Well, you can just say, instead of adding, let's just say you ate 3 more apples. You just know that's how. You can just say I ate 5. Just reassign it, the value 5. Change this 2 to 5. And you'll notice that it still prints out 2, 5. And that's because when this was printed out, it still equals 2. And then down here is when we changed it to equal 5, because this gets ran in order. It says, okay, let's run this line, then this line, this line, this line, this line, this line. So at this line, number of apples eaten today was equal to 2. It was not equal to 5. It wasn't until down here that we changed it to 5. And so that's why we get this output. So let's talk about some division and multiplication and something called a modulus. Those are your other basic math operations here. Now I'm sure you can guess how division is going to work. You know, if we change this to 4, this doesn't really make sense all that much, but the math is the same, so we'll just go ahead and run with it. I don't know, it doesn't make sense, but the math, it works. If you divide by 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2, so we should get 4 and 2. And as you can see, that works out fine. And if we were to multiply by 2, we should get 8, because 4 times 2 is 8. So math, to be honest, it kind of works just how you would expect it to. Now, if you remember back to the last tutorial when we talked about primitive data types and how you can have decimal points in some types of data, but not decimal points in other types of data. Well, what if we said this is 1 apple and we're going to divide it by 2? Well, 1 divided by 2 is 0.5, but a 0.5 cannot be stored into an int, because remember, this is an int right here. The number of apples eaten is an int. So what do you think is going to happen? Let's find out. It says 0. Well, why is that? Well, this equation right here, what it equates to is 1 divided by 2, which equals 0.5. Because it's an integer, it literally just hacks off that. It just gets rid of the decimal. It just ignores it. If I were to change this to 0.9, well, right here it'll still print out because I'm not storing this in an integer. I'm just saying literally print this out. But if we were to change this to 0.9 and then print out the number of apples eaten today. For one, it's not going to let us, because it's going to say, you know, hey, this is, you know, incompatible types, possible lossy conversion from double to int. So we can go ahead and do what's called an explicit cast and just go ahead and type that. I'll explain that more later. This just says, hey, I know I'm going to lose data, don't care, convert it to an integer. Again, we'll cover that later in a different thing. But as you can see, it still says 0. It doesn't round up. It doesn't round down. It doesn't doesn't round at all. It just literally hacks off the decimal and anything that comes after it. So it does not matter how many 9s you put after it. It will not equal 1 until you say this is 1.9. Then it'll go ahead and say 1 because it just hacks off the 0.9 and you're left with 1. So you got to be a little bit careful of that when you're doing division because it will just get rid of the decimal. If we were to change this to a double, and then we were to say, you know, this equals the current number of apples eaten today divided by 2, again, 1 divided by 2, but we're storing it as a double, not as an integer, now you get the full 0.5, because now it's actually stored as a decimal. And another interesting thing you should note is that up here we say the value is just 1, but when we print it out, it says 1.0. And again, it's because it's a decimal. You can format it, but different topic, different day. So that's why you get this output, is because it is a decimal, so it prints it out as a decimal. And 1 is really equal to 1.0. They're the same number. So yeah. And like I said, you don't lose any data here because a double can store a 0.5. It's allowed to do that. So that's multiplication and division, which is great. And you could do this right here as well. You don't actually need to reassign it here. You can go ahead and get rid of this line completely, and you can actually do it right here within the string concatenation. And what it'll do is it'll say number of apples eaten is, you know, concatenate this result. So you can do math right in this, right in here. You don't need to do it separately. And as you can see, it still runs just fine. So just kind of another little side note, and a lot of those little kind of tips and tricks almost kind of thing you'll pick up on as you go about programming, and as you see other people do it. You're not really going to be aware of every single little thing that you can do all at once, because that's just kind of information overload kind of thing. But yeah, just know that you can do it right here. You can even do 1.02. Well, why did that happen? Well, think about it. Remember when I said plus sign is a string concatenation? It's saying number of apples eaten, and then it says, okay, stick this value right after it, which is 1.0. Just talk about right here. And then it's saying, and then stick a 2 right after that. So you got to be a little bit careful when doing addition, because what you can do is you can use parentheses to your advantage, and then it'll go ahead and calculate the parentheses, and then it'll concatenate it at the end. So 2 plus 1 is 3. Number of apples eaten, 3. So if just kind of something to be aware about when you are doing addition within a string concatenation, make sure you use parentheses appropriately, because you will get some weird results if you don't. So just be careful. It's always good to test when you're expecting some output. Test it, make sure you actually get that expected output. If you don't, think about it and try and understand why. What is it doing from a computer's perspective? So if you remember, there was one more thing that I did want to talk about, and that's something called a modulus operator. And a modulus operator, to be 100% honest with you, when I first learned about it, I did not see the use in this thing. I was like, this is the most useless thing I have ever come across in programming. But it's not. When you get better, it's one of the most useful things. And what a modulus operator does is, actually, let's create a little bit of a better example here. I'm gonna say, okay, years. Okay, let's write a program to do this. Let's write a program that does this. We're gonna give it a number of days, and then we're gonna print out how many years that is, and how many days, and days like left, basically. So, for example, we're gonna say input 400, and our expected output should say that's 1 year and, well, 365, 400 minus 365 would be 35 days. So this is what we should output. So 400 days is equal to 1 year and 35 days. Well, how do we do that? Do we just keep subtracting 365 until we get something less than that? Like how do we, what's an easy way to go about that? Well, let's go ahead and say int input, and again we said we're gonna equal that to 400 basically, and then we're gonna say int year output, and we're gonna say int day output. Now notice I'm not assigning these values yet, and the reason is because we don't know the values yet. We don't have to assign them right here. You can just declare the variable. This is declared and assigned. It's declared as int input, or it's declared as input of type int, and we're giving it a value of 400. This is just declared, and that's fine. We can declare it up here, and then later down here we can assign it a value. So let's go ahead and say year output. Well, what is that equal to? Well, that's equal to the input, which is in days, divided by 365, right? And because it's converted to an int, we use that to our advantage, because the reality is if we were to go, let's get a calculator up here, right? Let's go ahead and bring this over. The reality is if we said 400 divided by 365, we get 1 point whatever. Well, we don't care about that. We only want the years. We only want this first number, right? So that's kind of why it's almost useful to have the int just cut off the decimal. We don't have to worry about saying, okay, you're going to get this long number, now only give me the stuff before that. We don't got to worry about any of that. We can just say input divided by 365, done. That's it. And this will return 1 because, again, it's going to hack off the decimal and you're just left with 1. Well, now how do we get the days? Because 0.0958, that's not how many days it is, right? Well, that's where the modulus operator comes in. So, the days, day output is equal to the input modulus, which is, we use the percent sign, 365. So here's what the modulus operator does. Okay, let's get our calculator back up. I can show you this. What it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, what's the input? That's 400. Modulus 365. Basically, it says divide it by 365 and give me the remainder. But it's the old, like, first grade remainder. It's not the decimal 365, this 0.09, whatever else, right? That's exactly. This says give me the remainder. What's left afterwards? What doesn't evenly divide into 365? So 400 minus 365, 35, because 35 is less than 365. You can't divide it any further. 365 doesn't go into 35 any more times. So that's it. It's going to return 35. If we were to say 800, it would say, okay, minus 365, minus 365. 70 is our remainder, right? So it gives you the old, like when you're first learning how to do division, and you don't talk about decimals and you're doing the long division way, and they say, okay, 3 divided by 2 is like 1 with 1 more remaining, right? And you remember that? And then later you kind of learn about, you were dividing by 2, so you can just take that remainder over 2, so 1 over 2, so 1 and 1/2 is equal to 3 over 2, if that kind of makes sense. If you were to say, 5 divided by 7, well, that's 0 with a remainder of 5, right? Because 7 does not go into 5 an even amount of times. You're left with 5 over. And that's what the modulus operator does. It gives you the remainder, but not the decimal. There's a difference. So, how do we print this out? Well, we wanted to print it out in this format. So, some number of years and some number of days. Well, this would be equal to the year output, plus we want to say the word years, right? Plus the number of days, the day output, and then we want to say the number of, or we just want to write the word days. Now, I want you guys to think about this for a minute, and just think in your head, pause the video if you need to, look at this line of code and tell me what's wrong with it. Think about how it's going to print this out and tell me why is this going to show up weird. Okay, go ahead and pause the video now and unpause it when you think you found it, and we'll run the program and we'll figure it out. Okay, so hopefully you guys have decided what's wrong with this, and we'll go ahead and run it. 1 year's 365 days. So what we actually want to do is put some spaces here, just like that, and then when you run it, it will say 1 year's 365 days. The years, you know, maybe for now you just do that, right? Year possibly is S. And so now if we change this input, let's say we do 15,000 days. Well, that's 41 years and 35 days. What if you do a less even number, 15,629 days, and you run it? That's 42 years and 299 days. So there you go. You have a simple program that's going to actually be somewhat maybe useful. You never know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you want to know like somebody, some of your friends just messing with you, and he's like, hey, I found out that I'm, 10,973 days old, and you're like, oh, you're okay. You're 30 years and 29 days old. Like, I don't know, but there's a program that's, actually has some functionality to it, more than just saying print out whatever. And you'll notice another benefit to this program: when we want to change our input, we only have to change this one number. Our math holds up for any number that we enter in. We only have to change the input. So you could say that. Go ahead and print it out. That's 18,038 years and 282 days. So if we really want to be technical, this input is in days. So you don't really get, you could say days here. Days. So there you go. And also we don't add commas in here. That'll mess it up. So don't do that. That's bad. But yeah, and so there you go. So there's kind of there's a program for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope that kind of explains some of the basic math operations. And yeah, so thanks so much for watching, guys. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments, and I'd be more than happy to answer it, or make a follow-up video, maybe explaining something a little bit better. I'm still pretty new at teaching this kind of stuff, so it can be kind of difficult. This is stuff that I've been working with for years, so explaining it it's difficult for me. So if I didn't explain it well enough, feel free to let me know, and I'll try and clear it up. But thanks so much for watching, guys, and I hope to see you all next time. Have a good day.